members' differing experiences with and feelings about conflict helps a team engage in unfiltered, productive debate. Understanding team members' differing experiences with and feelings about conflict helps a team engage in unfiltered, productive debates. Yeah, I bet you got this one. That one's true, right? That's what we're going for. So maybe you learned a few things right there. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think about conflict? What do you think about? Well, this was actually a question that was asked by Wiley of over 12,000 business professionals. They asked them that question. What's the first thing that comes to mind? And you can see this is one of those little word graphs. Drama was by far number one. The number one response was when they think about conflict, they think about drama. And there's lots of other words. Probably all of these are familiar to you. You know, you can see the same thing. It's tense, there's arguments, there's bullying, sometimes ego, stress, negativity. It's drama. Conflict is just something that we're not comfortable with, and it produces a lot of feelings for us. And that's the main reason we're having this session, is because we want to learn how to be more comfortable with that. 70% of managers, directors, and executives said conflict negatively impacts the efficiency in their department. I wonder if you would agree with that. That's huge, though. 70% of managers and directors say that interpersonal conflict negatively impacts efficiency in their department. And when you think about that inefficiency, that translates to what? Time. So look at this. Managers, directors, and executives spend an average of 3.2 hours per week dealing with conflict. Oh my gosh, 3.2 hours per week. Let's do a little math on that. Let's see, if we have a standard 48-hour work week year, that's almost a month. That's almost a solid month every year of time spent dealing with conflict rather than performance-driven initiatives. Isn't that crazy? Almost a month. Now, like I said, this came from a survey done from John Wiley and Sons Incorporated. But I did some research on this and preparing for this. I went out on Google and I searched for, common themes on this. What was the time spent? Some of the surveys that have been done out there say it's even more time than this. So this is almost a conservative estimate. The point is that it's taking a lot of time for us to manage these interpersonal conflicts and this drama and everything that's going on that could be spent helping the team to really improve performance. 69% said their job satisfaction, their personal job satisfaction would improve if their coworkers handled conflict more effectively. So it impacts more than our time and overall efficiency. When we think about overall employee satisfaction, overall job satisfaction, 69% said their job satisfaction would improve if basically conflict were handled more effectively in their workplace. That too is a really huge number, isn't it? Huge. And it goes even further. Some people just say, I can't do it. I have to leave. What percentage, if you were guessing, and you don't even have to put in chat, you can just think to yourself, but what percentage of people do you think that were surveyed said they had actually left the job because of conflict? They actually left the job. They said, forget it, I can't do this, and they resigned. Remember, this was more than 12,000 people surveyed. Ready for this? 40%. 40% said they had left a job because of unhealthy conflict. Can you imagine that? 40%? I mean, that's huge. And today, we're struggling, especially as small businesses, we are struggling to keep people, to keep our people, to keep, especially, the people that we value in our workplace and take care of them because we need them so much. And it's hard. It's really hard right now to get those quality people. We don't want to lose them. We're doing everything we can to retain our good people. This is one thing we can do, is help deal with conflict, make it productive so that people don't feel like they're being bullied or there's too much gossip or there's too much drama or that they're not being asked their opinion. but instead that we're handling conflict in a healthy way. There's several myths around conflict, we've all heard them. Conflict is nothing but bad. That's a myth. As a matter of fact, when it's worked out constructively, conflict can be used as an opportunity for positive change. Teamwork means sitting around together in harmony and singing Kumbaya. I like that song. We used to sing that in Girl Scouts. But actually, it means moving forward together. It means turning differences into strengths. It means solving problems. And it means helping our organization to effectively solve goals, to meet goals. Some people think that conflict squashes creativity. It just shuts it down. But if conflict is productive, it actually forces creativity. And you'll come to see how that works today. So, and the truth is, productive conflict is required for a team to grow. It's something we have to have if our team is going to grow and be a really high performing team. The value of teams. I always like to include this because I love this quote from Ken Blanchard. None of us is as smart as all of us. Now, we talked in the first session about the value of teams and what teams bring to us, increased efficiency, increased productivity, increased creativity. We can produce more work. We talked about all the values that a team brings, but we don't want to forget that this is so important on a team to have everybody participating. It's really true. None of us is as smart as all of us. We need all of us together. All of you have employees, coworkers, teammates who have valuable knowledge and great skills that have to be shared. And if we're doing anything to prevent their talents from coming through, that's just a shame for us. Because to have a great team, we need everyone. We need everyone's talent, everyone's skills. That's why they're here. That's why we hired them. So let's bring them in. Remember the definition of a team, just to refresh your memory for those of you that have been in a couple of these so far. A team is two or more people, and that's the first stop, two or more people. So, people think a team has to be a minimum of 4 people and a maximum of 12. No, a team is 2 or more people. So it's probable that you belong to a number of teams. But let's look at the rest of the definition. They come together for a common purpose. Yeah, that makes sense. Of course, we're coming together for a common purpose. We're trying to do the same thing. But here's the kicker: who are mutually accountable for results. That's the kicker. That's the sticky point. Ow. 2 or more people who come together for a common purpose and who are mutually accountable for results. And I'm going to repeat this from the last session because I think this is so important. If you're a team leader, this is where a lot of teams go wrong, because the team leader understands that they're accountable. And they will say to me, I'm accountable. I'm the one that has to be accountable for what we produce. And if we do well, it's all on the team. But if we do bad, it's all on me. That's kind of their mentality, right? If we do well, then I need to be, thanking the team. But if it goes bad, then it's me. I'm accountable. That's not how a team works. and that's not how a team leader should work. A team leader should work understanding that whether we fail or whether we succeed, we're all accountable. We're all in this together. Everyone's a part of it. Team leaders who don't understand this, don't delegate, don't use the talents of their team, and don't get great results. So I know that's a little bit of a repeat. That's just so important. I want to make sure that we understand this definition, because it's not what you would really think, that mutual accountability. I mean, honestly, if you have 2 or more people who come together for a common purpose, if they're not mutually accountable, that's not even a team. That's just a work group. It's just a bunch of people working together, a work group. So understanding that definition of team is important for this session today. So the study of teams and team conflict. I've been using the 5 dysfunctions of a team model from Patrick Lencioni for a lot of this, because as you all know, and it's on the first slide, and I'm certified and licensed in that program. It's called the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. But I do want to show you that Patrick Lencioni isn't the first person to talk about conflict on a team. As a matter of fact, this one's Ken Blanchard. if you've seen this book, this is a great little book. You know, Ken Blanchard books are awesome. They're like this thin. You can read them over at Cafe Mocha and Barnes & Noble. It's fantastic. This one's called The One Manager Builds High-Performing Teams. And here's what he says are the characteristics of high-performing teams. And it's interesting, his acronym spells perform. But look what's in the middle of it. Relationships and communication. That's essentially conflict. You know, if you don't have good relationships on your team, if you don't have good communication, you're not going to have a high-performing team. This is what Blanchard says. He says, different ideas and opinions are welcome. Team members practice active listening. That's what Ken Blanchard is talking about. So even in his model, he doesn't call it conflict, but he calls it, you know, what relationships and communication. It has to be there. It's kind of funny on a side note. Patrick Lencioni in his model, as you'll see, calls it conflict. And he tells the story of people asking him continuously, why did you call it conflict? You built this model. You could have called it anything. Could have called it debate. He said, I called it conflict because I don't want to, you know, give the impression that it's easy. Conflict is hard and it's uncomfortable. So let's call it what it is. And I think that's kind of funny that he decided to call it that, you know, because in some of these other models, you see it called something different. Like this one, you've probably heard of this one by Dr. Bruce Tuckman, the forming, storming, norming, performing model. And then he came back in the 60s and he added the fifth stage, which was adjourning. But look what's second in his model. He says, first we have to start out forming, and that's when we just get together, we start to know everybody, we start to understand personalities. We're like, oh, what are we here for? And then we go right to storming. Second phase, where we go, what have I got myself into? What is this? What is going on here? What's the matter with these people? So in his model, he says, this is where members get to know each other. And often team members compete for status and they argue as personalities begin to emerge. The major job here is to work through the frustrations and focus on the goal. And Tuckman's model, you know, if you study it, it doesn't really offer us a lot about how to do that, but he's telling us that people have to really get used to working with one another. And this means learning to adapt to various styles that people bring to their work. So if you're a fan of his model, yeah, he has conflict right there as stage 2, even though he calls it storming, which I think is really probably a pretty good word for it, except that it doesn't give us the impression that it can be productive. Storming, you know, it sounds like you have to go to the next phase to get anywhere. I don't know, something to think about. And then maybe some of you are familiar with Thomas Killman's conflict modes. Now, this is pretty interesting because if you've ever done this, and I'd really be interested to know if anybody ever has, he has an assessment tool that you can use to figure out what your conflict style is. And what's surprising about this, you know, you look at this and you kind of look and see, you know, which one do you think would be best? And you know, just looking at the model, when you look at it, are you like me? Because I go, compromising, of course, but no. In this model, collaboration is considered the most effective style. Not competing, not avoiding, not accommodating, and not compromising, because compromising means there's a winner and a loser. So in his model, collaboration, which again, think what you have to go through to get to collaboration, all the other things we've been talking about, relationships and learning how to get along with others and having open debate, right? So isn't that interesting? Would you have thought compromising too? When I first looked at it, I thought, oh, compromising, that's got to be the best one, but collaborating, interesting. And then, of course, the model we've been talking about, the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team that's based on the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And you can see conflict is right there in this model. It's the second one. And when we talk about conflict here, what we're talking about is debate that is focused on concepts and ideas and avoids mean-spirited personal attacks. With trust, conflict is nothing but the pursuit of the truth for the best possible answer. And we started last week with trust, and some of you were on that call. So last week we just focused on trust, and if you missed it, it'll be available on the YouTube channel in due time here. But if we start with trust, so that we all trust one another and we've accomplished that vulnerability-based trust, then we can have open debates and talk about ideas and concepts so that we can be open with one another. And it may look different from from team to team. It may look different from family to family, culture to culture, and that's okay. The fact is that it's not mean-spirited. It's like you believe that no one's holding back. Everyone's trying to do their best. And it's going to be okay if you disagree with someone, that you can voice it. So let's talk more about that. Let's see if you've ever been in a team meeting. Let's see if this rings any bells for you. A team that fears conflict. Boring meetings because they're usually pretty quiet and everybody just kind of sits there and nods. And then after the meeting, they go out the door and say, oh boy, was that stupid, right? Because they wouldn't dare voice that during the meeting. They ignore controversial topics that are critical to success. We don't want to go there. We don't want to have the, we don't want to talk about this, Anybody ever seen that movie Encanto that's out on Disney? It's a, and they have a hit song from that one called Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno. This is conflict. We don't talk about conflict. Maybe we just call it Bruno. That's for any of you that have children who have watched that movie. Fails to tap into all opinions and perspectives of team members. People are afraid to voice it. They don't speak up. They waste time and energy with interpersonal issues. Now, you've probably been in this meeting. You've probably been in some meetings like this where you go in and, there's an agenda and you follow it and you nod your heads and you leave the meeting. It doesn't mean you agreed with anything. It was pretty boring. It's just, we had a meeting because we're supposed to have a meeting. And that's what it looks like when we're not really experiencing productive conflict. If we do have conflict, if it's productive conflict, you're going to see a lively team meeting because people are going to voice their opinions. They're going to speak up. When they disagree, they're going to give their opinions. We're going to find a way to get the ideas of everybody on the table. We're going to call you by name and say, Devin, you haven't said anything yet. What do you think we should do? We're able to solve our problems quickly because we trust one another. We can just talk about these things, get them out in the open, minimize politics. And the best thing is just openly discuss these really critical topics that we're afraid to discuss. If you've ever been in a team meeting and maybe you are that leader, I don't know. But many times what we find with teams is that the leader themselves discourages us from having productive conflict because they become uncomfortable when two employees start to debate issues. That's something we have to watch out for. All right, so here's a quick quiz for you. Let's see how you do on this one. Actually, conflict in teams is a sign of health. And this is a multiple choice. And I'm going to read it to you in case for some reason you can't see my screen. A, it's good to take out all that anger somewhere. I kind of like that one. B, it means that team members feel it is safe to disagree and fully discuss issues they trust. C, when there's no conflict, there's no reason to have those fun team meetings. And D, it's the best way to keep things exciting for everyone. Oh, I see the right answer being put in the chat here. Exactly, B, it means that team members feel it's safe to disagree and fully discuss issues they trust. And that's very healthy. And that's what we're looking for is that, we're looking for a healthy team. And in a healthy team, team members, they know it's safe to disagree. They know it's safe to offer a different opinion and different ideas. That's what we're really hoping for. So let's talk about this difference between healthy conflict and unhealthy conflict. What does that even look like? You may be wondering that, like, what do you mean by healthy conflict? So let me show you. Let's start with unhealthy conflict. What does unhealthy conflict look like? Well, it might look like this, finger pointing, blame, Well, Shannon was supposed to take care of that, so that's why this isn't done. Insults. Oh, this is hard stuff. Ultimatums. Well, if we can't do it my way, then we just shouldn't do it at all. Or if we don't do this, this is surely going to fail. Defensiveness. And we've seen this, right? People have an idea, they're tied to it, and they become very defensive when someone offers a different opinion. That's not healthy. That's unhealthy conflict. And shutting down. And this is the other thing we see is some people will just stop talking. They'll withdraw completely from the meeting. They just go off in their own little world somewhere, in Jacqueline land, whatever it is, they go off in their head and won't even participate. Those are all signs of unhealthy conflict. Raising your voice, disrupting progress, disregarding facts. And sometimes it even comes to making threats. That is not healthy conflict. And this is exactly why people are uncomfortable with it, because sometimes it does feel like it's very unhealthy. And this is what we have to figure out, is how to not go that far, but to make it healthy conflict. And here's what healthy conflict looks like. It's honest, clear communication. And being able to say, Joel, could you say that again? Because I don't think I understood that, right? Clear and honest communication means active listening, being present in the moment, listening, active listening. And you all probably had classes on active listening, and you know what that is. But you know what? Active listening, I find, is hard, and it takes practice. It's not something that's natural. We have to constantly remind ourselves to be in that moment and to practice active listening. No assumptions, ask outright. You can't just say, well, I'm assuming that she means this is going to happen first. You have to speak up and ask, wait, no assumptions, let me just make sure that that's based on this. So clear up those assumptions. Questioning and debate, healthy conflict. When you have people questioning, Jennifer, why did you say that? I'm not sure I get that. And then Jennifer responds, and I say, but Jennifer, I don't know, what about this? And we're having a debate. That's healthy. That's good. That's good conflict. That's what we're looking for. Respect for one another. Shannon, I respectfully disagree. I'm not really sure I understand where you're coming from on that, respect. And I use the word respect just for that demonstration, but you know what I'm saying, be respectful. Different points of view and ideas are welcome. As a matter of fact, that's what makes us creative. That's what makes us a great team. When we come up with some of these people that come up with the craziest ideas, sometimes they just hit on the right one, or it makes us think in a different direction and helps us to be more creative in our thinking. So we welcome those things. We don't shy away from them. Now, in Lencioni's model, what he gives us is something really interesting called a conflict continuum. And I thought I would share this with you because this may help you to understand a little bit more what I'm talking about. The way he identifies it, he says, like on this scale, 0 is the ideal conflict point. But he says it's very easy for us to go either way. So on one end, down here, where we have healthy conflict, the 0 to 5 is healthy conflict. But you can see at the extreme end, 5, artificial harmony, that's not good either. We don't want to be on either end of the scale. The closer we are to 0, the better. But there is a line we cross when healthy conflict becomes unhealthy conflict. And that's what the 0 in the middle represents. So way out here at the end, artificial harmony, what that looks like is everybody nods and pretends to agree and just wants to get out of that meeting and go on with it. And when they leave the meeting, that probably means we didn't commit to anything. We didn't get anything. We're not going to get results, but we got the meeting over fast and got back to our desk. Thank goodness, right? So artificial harmony is not good. On the other end, where you have the negative 5, really awful, ugly, mean-spirited attacks. That's the worst kind of conflict. That's totally unproductive. If a team is working this, they are going to cross the line at some point. But understanding when you cross the line and be able to pull it back is what we're hoping for. Most teams actually live in artificial harmony because they're afraid of stepping over that line. But we have to have the courage to go there. We're going to step over the line. And when we do, that's going to be kind of a moment of truth, I think, for us. It's an opportunity to recover and be vulnerable around it. And then to find a way back to recover and to see that we did. And this gives us the courage to go right up to that line. And that's what we want to do. We want to go right up to that line without crossing over into unpredictable conflict, but knowing that at some point it's going to happen and we're going to have to figure out how to get back. And we're going to have stronger teams and stronger relationships if we can kind of think of it this way. I hope that will be helpful to you to think about this, to understand that there's a line you can cross where we get into that really, this mean-spirited, finger-pointing, threatening attacks. That's not what we're looking for. But when we do step over it, being able to pull back is what we're hoping for. So maybe that'll help you. I think that continuum idea is a really, really good way to think about it. Because if we do have debate, we're going to have times when we go all over this continuum. And trying to center back into that 0 point there where ideal conflict is, we're going to continue to do that as a team. And when we all know that's what we're trying to do, we begin to trust one another and understand that that's what we're trying to do. And that really helps us. The better able team members are to engage, speak, listen, hear, interpret, and respond constructively, the more likely their teams are to leverage conflict rather than be leveled by it. Need I say more? So why? Why do we even have these problems? What are the common causes of conflict on teams? Well, let's talk about some of these. And some of these have come up in other parts of our series already and will continue to come up. But one of the big reasons is that the purpose is not clear. Many times when we have meetings, we're not even clear what the purpose of the meeting is. I don't know. I mean, I'll ask you to think about this. When you have a team meeting, do you go in and start with the purpose of today's meeting is, and then stick to that purpose? Or do you go in to have a meeting because you should have a meeting because we're supposed to have meetings? Any meeting should have a clear purpose. You know, the purpose is today is to decide this part of this project or decide how to solve this problem. So having a clear purpose, if the purpose isn't clear, that's going to cause conflict because, you know, Kristen's over there thinking we're trying to do one thing and Elizabeth is over there trying to think we're trying to do something different. Of course, there's going to be conflict. We haven't taken time to clearly define our purpose. Undefined goals. We don't really know what we're trying to achieve. We're all working really, really hard, but are we even working on the same thing? You know, does everybody understand what the main thing is right now, what we're supposed to be working on, or are we out there working on other things? You know, Kristen's working on this really, really hard, and that has nothing to do with what Joel's working on, but we didn't know it because we weren't clear. So that's really important to make sure that we understand our goals, that we're all working on the same goals, and that we're very clear on what we're doing. Sometimes organizational norms cause conflict because, you know, norms usually overcome rules, right? I mean, we know there are rules, but, you know, like we're supposed to all be at work at 8 o'clock. But, you know, the norm here is that as long as you're here by 10 after 8, nobody cares, right? Sometimes those kind of things cause conflict on teams because you have people who are thinking, and what's that come down to? Again, it comes down to clarity, right? Comes down to clarity, identifying exactly how we're supposed to behave and how we're supposed to, what our culture is. Self-interest. This is a tough one. And as we go through this series, you know, one of the things that we've been talking about is results and having those results. And at the end, we get great results because we have synergy on the team. We have people who believe that the results of the team are more important than their results as an individual. And that's hard to get to. But if I'm just looking out for me, number one, then there's going to be conflict because I don't really care what y'all think. I care what's going to get me ahead. And that could definitely cause conflict. And sometimes it's a lack of trust. You know, we talked about trust last week, confidence among team members that their peers' intentions are good and that there is no reason to be protective or careful around the group. And again, we did a whole session on that. But when teams lack trust, they spend a crazy amount of time and energy managing behaviors and interactions within the group. And they dread team meetings. They're reluctant to take risks. They're very reluctant to offer assistance to each other. And what we usually see with that is low morale. And remember, with this model, we need that base of trust. Only when we really trust each other can we have productive conflict. So we have to think about trust. And then, of course, there's some other little things you might have heard of, like groupthink. You've heard of groupthink, which is a failure to manage disagreement. And what happens with groupthink, and we see this in teams sometimes, is that everybody just eventually gives up and goes along with it because they don't want to argue about it. They don't want to debate. You know, it'll be easier just to nod my head and go on with this, you know. and that's a failure to manage disagreement. We also see a failure to manage agreement, which that one's interesting because what you have is, Devin comes into a meeting and says, I think we should do this. Don't you think so? Jennifer, don't you think so? And Jennifer's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Sure, I guess so. And before you know it, everybody's agreeing that we should do this, and nobody even knows why we're doing this because we didn't even talk about it. We just all go along with it. So either way, when you think about groupthink, I think one of the most famous examples of this is what happened with the Challenger, the disaster with the Challenger, where you had one person who insisted that there was something wrong and they shouldn't launch, but nobody could listen to this person, nobody could handle that disagreement. They all wanted to launch. They had reasons why they wanted to launch, and finally the person just said, yeah, okay. And they launched, and that's probably one of the most famous examples. So if you want to look at that some more, go read that as a case study. It's fascinating. So you got to watch out for these things too. So what can we do? What can we do after all this I've said and convinced you about conflict? What can we do to actually master it? And like I said, what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to come at this from two perspectives. One, as a team, and two, as a team member. So first, let's talk about what you can do to master conflict as a team. These things should sound familiar because we've talked about the causes behind them already. The first thing is to work on trust. You got to have trust on a team, as I just said. So the first thing is work on trust. Do those activities I showed you before, and I'll actually be showing you some more activities for all of these next week. In that session, I'll be showing you some activities that you can do to work on trust. So work on trust. Confront and deal with issues. Don't avoid issues. A lot of teams don't want to talk about it because it's hard, and we don't really have time for this. You have to make time, and maybe you have a meeting. Just the purpose of the meeting is just to talk about this one difficult issue. But don't avoid conflict. You have to confront them. You have to deal with this issue with the whole team. Encourage that healthy debate. So when you see, Elizabeth say, excuse me, I hear what everybody is saying. I appreciate it, but I'm not sure I agree. And let me tell you what I'm thinking. And instead of, saying, look, we've already talked about Elizabeth. Thank you very much. We're like, Elizabeth, thank you for showing us a different opinion. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's talk through that. So encourage it. When somebody does have the courage to disagree, when somebody does have the courage to debate an issue, let's make an example of it and say, thank you for doing that. That's helping the whole team. We appreciate it. Look for common ground wherever you can. And this is especially if you're a team leader. You may have your team all over the place, which is a beautiful thing, but somewhere in there's common ground. And if you can just pull that from the discussion and just start listing, okay, well, of everything we talked about, these are the three things I'm hearing over and over. List those three things and now start over. It goes great. So look for that common ground to bring it all together. Own and resolve conflict as a team. Just be open with the team that this is all of us. This is not just my problem. This is all of us. So let's handle it as a team. And here's another one that I've added recently because I think this is something we need to talk about that gets left off. And this is just to give think time. And here's what I mean by that. We know from studying personalities, and, if you've heard me before, I'm a big fan of DISC. I love personality. I think the personality theory, and I think understanding personalities is one of the best things you can do for your team is to understand differences and then to work together to, give and take so that you have a better relationship. There is a whole segment of our population. Honestly, when you look at the statistics on it, it's 50%. 50% of the US population has a personality where they're active and they want to make quick decisions and they want to move quickly. 50% of us are reflective. We need time to think. We need time to think through things, and we need to reflect before we jump on that idea. We don't give that consideration sometimes as a team. We're like, we need a decision, we need it now, we want to have about 1 hour to make it. And so you have 50% of your team who needs time to think and reflect, going along with something that, 2 hours later, they're going, well, this is not going to work. Now we've made this decision and wasted all this time. So whenever you can, if it's an important decision, maybe give a little break in between the final decision, like have the discussion, see where it takes you, then maybe say, let's come back after lunch and have a final look at this. Or, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we just need 15 minutes. Let's just make sure that we haven't thought of anything new. So give that thing time, especially when it's a really important decision. That will really help you as a team. Okay, consensus. And consensus is a really important thing for a team to understand. My belief is that most people don't really understand what consensus is. Many people think that consensus means, does everybody agree? And we all nod our heads and we say we have consensus, everybody agrees. But the truth is, hardly ever does everybody agree. People will go along with it and they'll smile and nod their heads, but that doesn't necessarily mean they agree. So here's a different way to look at consensus. Everyone agrees to support a team decision. Not everyone agrees, but everyone agrees to support a team decision. If you can get everybody to agree to support that decision before you walk out the door, then when everybody walks out the door, they're going to have a lot of peer accountability because everybody agreed to it. Nobody's going to be saying, well, that was stupid. I just went along with it because I wanted an hour meeting. We're going to hold them accountable. Here's how you do this. First thing is to identify all the options. Make sure everything's out on the table. So of everything we've talked about, here are our top 3 ideas. Build on common ideas that you have as you discuss. Look at all those alternatives and compromises. Have that open debate. Discuss the differences. Then identify your best choices. And here's the key right here. Test consensus. And the way you test consensus is to go person by person and say, all right, so this is the decision we've made. Of everything we've talked about, there seems to be agreement that this is what we should do, that this is our best option. Joel, when we leave this meeting today, can you support this? And you watch to see how Joel responds. If he rolls his eyes, you need to stop and say, Joel, what's up? What are you thinking? What are we missing? Let him express it. And you do that person by person. Thing is, it's going to be a win-win, whatever happens here. Joel may come up with, I see Joel gave me a laugh there. Joel may come up with something we hadn't thought of at all. So we need to talk about it. Awesome. Let's do it now instead of, a month from now going, oh my gosh, why didn't we think of that? So let's do it now. Or maybe Jacqueline just is totally opposed. And no matter what we say, she's never going to agree to it. And we have to go ahead, even though we know that she doesn't agree. But you know what? I'd really rather know now that Jacqueline doesn't agree than 2 weeks from now. Let her express her opinion. It's okay. Because the rest of us are still thinking this is the best option. Wouldn't you rather know that now? So when everybody leaves and everyone has pledged their support, or at least had a chance to voice their opposition or their concerns, we can take it forward as a team and have good results. Most people understand they're not always going to get their way. We're grown-ups now, and we know we're not always going to get our way. But I want you to hear me. I want you to let me voice my opinion. I want you to know what I was thinking. I want to have an opportunity to say it. And that's what consensus is about. That's what consensus is really about, giving everybody a chance to voice their opinion. That's true consensus. And that's an important part of a team meeting when you're making a decision. Go for consensus. Quick quiz. Here, you ready? Here we go. It's likely that your team has varied levels of trained individuals with different areas of expertise for purposes of conflict resolution. What do you think? This factor may, A, reduce conflict because there are subject area experts available to help pull out facts. It may create conflict because many will not share information willingly. It may create conflict because everyone believes they have the right answer. It may have no effect. So what do you think? And I'm going to tell you, I'm using this example because of a particular team that I worked with, and it was medical professionals. And they had varied levels of trained individuals. All of them were experts in their field, and they had tremendous amounts of conflict. And you know why? Because everyone thought they were right. Everyone was well trained, everyone had expertise, everyone thought they were right. So that actually caused more conflict on their team. But how perfect is it that you have all that expertise and you're trying to make a decision that impacts a lot of people, and you can openly discuss your expertise and your opinions and use your knowledge to make the best decision? Isn't that fantastic, really? I mean, that's productive conflict. Okay, so let's talk about how to help you manage conflict as an individual team member. Maybe you're not the leader of the team, you're just a lowly team member, but we're mutually accountable. So this is really important. How do we help ourselves? All right, first thing is voice your opinion. Be that person who is brave enough to say, here's what I'm thinking. Maybe it's a little bit different. Voice your opinion. I know that for a lot of you, 50% of our population, that is not easy. But if you want to be a great team member, then you need to be able to voice your opinion. You need to force yourself to do this. Seek out the opinions of your teammates during meetings. Be the person who says, Jacqueline, we haven't heard anything from you. What are you thinking? So that if Jacqueline is resistant to participate, that we give her a little boost, a little help. Listen for understanding. Use those active listening skills. Explore everyone's ideas to uncover the best solutions. Make sure you're including everyone, exploring all ideas. And withhold judgment. That's not easy for some of us. Withhold judgment and stick to facts. In the handout that was in the very top of the handout that I did for the very first session, on that handout, there's a self-assessment for, are you a good team member? So you might go back and pull that handout and try that assessment to see how you're doing. So there are a lot of things that you can do as an individual to help your team perform better. Next quiz. Avoiding conflict, A, is a guaranteed way to stay out of trouble. Well, no, not really. Allows others to have control of the situation. C, means you will never be blamed. Oh, I wish that were true. D, keeps people from withdrawing from work teams. No, avoiding conflict allows others to have control of the situation. It's not a guaranteed way to stay out of trouble. It's probably more of a way to get into trouble. It doesn't mean you're going to be free from blame. As a matter of fact, they may have more of a tendency to blame you because you're the one that didn't speak up. Keeps people from withdrawing from teams. No, not at all. Allows others to have control of the situation. Are you feeling smart now? You getting these right? Yeah? All right, here's another one for you then. Try this one. When you have to confront someone, the best way to do it is A, send an email so you can have your say without having to see their reaction. B, go talk to a friend so that you can deal with your feelings and not have to face the person. Hint, that's called gossip. C, swallow the whole thing and go get over it. Hint, that's going to give you a stomach ache. D, go talk to the person and then listen to what they have to say. And I know that's not always easy, but that really is the best thing to do, is talk to the person and see what they have to say. All right, so in summary, here are your big tips. First thing is to be present in the moment. Practice that active listening, listen for understanding, be there. Find that common ground wherever you can, look for the common ground and build on that. Be open and take time to reflect. Take time to think it over when you need to. Jennifer, I have just a little advice on virtual participants, virtual teammates, but let me just stop and see if you have any questions out there that we want to make sure we take care of before we wrap it up.
I do not see any questions in our box, but one of the things I thought in your handout was you had talked about these remote teams are a little more outspoken. Right?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah.
So, perhaps they bring up matters, to the forefront and these team meetings a little quicker.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let me show you what we're finding with our virtual teams. So The first thing is that we're being more careful, I think, to check in with everyone during debates. I think it's almost easier for us when we're leading a meeting to see the little blocks and know who hasn't been speaking and to check in with them. So that's kind of working in our favor. One of the things that's not working in our favor is that we don't have those informal conversations. And you know, that few minutes that you have before the meeting starts, getting a cup of coffee and eating a donut or whatever, you know, that small talk, it's missing for the virtual team members. So we have to find a way to build that in. And for me, what I usually do with that when I'm working with a team is I'll start off the meeting with, we're going to go to random breakout groups, just 2 people per room. And I just want you to say good morning and how are you? You know, I just give them a few minutes to do that. And I'll do that maybe 3 times. Just give them a couple of minutes, random assignment, you know, 2 people per room, just say good morning and how are you? Just to get a little bit of that small talk going because we're missing that. We really encourage everyone to keep their video on because we find that people who do not have their video on in team meetings are not participating at the level of others. So we want to encourage them to do that. What I would advise you with that is, you know, set up some ground rules for your team about how you're going to handle that. Like you can tell them, you know, if you need to blow your nose, it's okay to go dark for a minute, but then come back on. You know? Or if your husband, because I saw this happen, it was really ugly. If your husband comes out of the shower behind you and, you know, he's wrapped in a towel, then you could go dark while he walks by. It's okay. Use chat to share if you can't get a word in. You know, sometimes you really want to express something but you feel like you can't get a word in, which I think it's a little easier. And that's probably, Jennifer, what's leading to it being a little bit easier. People are a little more willing to talk because you can see who's talking and you can get in on the conversation a little easier than, and sometimes when we're in a room face to face, we're a little more intimidated by that. So I think that's why it's working better. But, you know, you can always go to chat, put something in there and use your gestures at the bottom because you can even raise your hand. And the thing that, I don't know if you know this about Zoom, but if you're doing a Zoom meeting and you raise your hand with those gestures, it automatically takes your picture, your camera, your block where you are, where it puts it up at the top, just like Jennifer right now. She's at the top because she raised her hand. Somebody else does that. If you raise your hand, it moves you right to the top so that as facilitator, I can see that Jennifer has her hand up. So that's good. So there are some, plus I got a message saying Jennifer raised her hand. So there's just some things about virtual teams. So it's definitely a little of a challenge to do virtual teams, but actually we're finding ways to do those pretty effectively that actually some of it is a little bit easier in some ways. Final quiz. Behavior that will reduce conflict in your workplace includes disguising your own needs and goals. I hope you're now shaking your head going, no. Keeping to yourself, oh no, we can't do that anymore, no. Denying that conflict exists, oh no. See how smart you are? Understanding the needs of coworkers. That's what we're going for, right? Okay, this is conflict. This is